Hey everyone, Jody here along with Niki and Kellie, who are here too. Hello.
Hello.
Hey.
And guess what time it is, folks? It is the Radiotopia fundraiser. Hold your applause. Niki and Kellie are going crazy. I can tell. But look, this is the moment each year when we remind you, the listener, that this show and every show in the Radiotopia network exists because of listener support.
Yes, and as you know, we are an independent show. We make all our own decisions. We're big kids, but we're also part of this incredible collective called Radiotopia. You may have seen some of the things happening across the media landscape, the podcast landscape in particular, layoffs.
I noticed.
Entire companies are folding. Shows are disappearing overnight, but not at Radiotopia. Radiotopia is growing. It's adding new shows, it's letting its creators try new things, and it's able to do that because it is built differently. It is creator-owned, independent, and powered by listeners who decide to support the shows and the network directly.
And that support feels really good. Like, don't we all need something that makes us feel really good? I know that I do. So I think we're looking for ways where we can support the things that we love and the things that we believe in. And that's where Radiotopia comes in. And when you give to Radiotopia, you're giving directly to the shows you love, not shareholders, not some big corporation, just to the creators and the stories you care about.
Look, if someone wants to be a shareholder, I'm not going to stop them.
By all means, but if you want to be a big corporation, we're going to judge you.
But look, it is true that the support you give to Radiotopia goes directly back to us and the other incredible shows that are part of this special collective. So if that sounds like the kind of media that you want to keep around and support, I hope you do. If you're listening, I have a hunch that you do. Help us keep it strong. Donate right now at thisdaypod.com. That's our website. You will see a link right there. It takes 1 minute. thisdaypod.com. And thank you, everyone. It really means a lot.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate you.
This day is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy to see if you could save when you bundle your home and auto policies. Try it at progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
This show is supported by Odoo. When you buy business software from lots of vendors, the costs add up and it gets complicated and confusing. Odoo solves this. It's a single company that sells a suite of enterprise apps that handles everything from accounting to inventory to sales. Odoo is all connected on a single platform in a simple and affordable way. You can save money without missing out on the features you need. Check out Odoo at odoo.com. That's odoo.com.
Hello and welcome to This Day, a history show from Radiotopia. My name is Jody Avirgan. This day, November 10th, 1969, a new show debuts on public television stations around the country. It opens with a quick title card, and then we see a montage of kids playing on the streets of New York City. Then it fades to a green street sign that says Sesame Street. Then we see an adult and a kid walk down the block, have a conversation with each other and with a neighbor, and then this giant yellow bird shows up and starts talking to them too, like it's totally normal to have this huge puppet just hanging out on your block. This, of course, is the debut of Sesame Street. And in those first 2 minutes, you kind of get it all. You get the urban utopia, you get adults treating kids like real people, and of course, you have Jim Henson's puppets. So it has been 56 years since that debut. I'm going to assume that almost every single person listening to this has some connection to Sesame Street, whether it helped raise you or helped you raise your kids. But let's talk about where it all came from. Here, as always, Nicole Hemmer of Vanderbilt and Kellie Carter-Jackson of Wellesley. Hello there.
Hello, Jody.
Hey there.
Excited about this one?
Yeah.
What letter is this episode brought to our listeners by?
I don't know. Do you even know how, maybe we'll get into this, but do you know how they chose what letters the episode was brought by?
No. Do you know?
I don't know. I know that first one.
I thought you were
going to
tell me something exciting.
I know.
Well, no. But that first one was brought to you by W, S, and E and the numbers 2 and 3. I'd be curious to know how they chose those. But look, I think this is such a rich and fun topic that we are going to do this in 2 parts. So in our first part, we're going to kind of talk about, I think, a lot of the big ideas and the philosophy that went into developing a sort of new kind of kids show, and then also like the look of it and the feel of it and so forth. And then we'll go right up to the moment it debuts. And then in the second part, we'll talk about the debut of the show, its initial reaction, how it's evolved over the years, and of course, our personal connection to the show. But I'm going to say it's safe to assume that Sesame Street has meant something pretty big for the two of you.
I mean, it's Sesame Street. I feel like isn't it just like the fabric of your childhood?
Yes.
It's just woven in there so tightly. You don't remember the first time you saw it. You don't remember the last time you saw it. You just have been your whole life. You've had Big Bird and Snuffleupagus right next to you.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. It's funny. I definitely can't remember the first episode I watched, but I do remember it just being like the sort of everything to my childhood was filtered through Sesame Street. And even though I did not live in a very urban environment, I still felt very close, and everything felt very relatable in a way that that was just interesting for a kid who grew up in the lily white suburbs.
So let me lay out some of the kind of key characters here and some of the context, and then we'll talk about sort of the state of TV and the state of children's education at the time as we then move towards Sesame Street being developed.
And by
But
key
I'm gonna just-
characters, you mean non-Muppet characters?
Yes. Yeah, I'm not going to do a capsule bio of Big Bird and all of them and Oscar and so forth. We could. But let me do a capsule bio of two people, Joan Gans Cooney and Lloyd Morissette. So these are two key characters who would go on to develop Sesame Street. But Joan Gans Cooney, born in 1930, daughter of a Jewish banker and a Catholic homemaker, moves to New York City in 1953 to work in television. And, you know, at that point, we'll talk about this, but at that point, TV is kind of seen as like, people look down their nose at television. By the time you get into the 1950s and 60s, there's a lot of schlock on there. And I think, you know, she kind of runs in intellectual circles and lefty circles. And I think a lot of her friends kind of look down their nose at her for wanting to engage in television. She's at CBS, and then she ends up moving to Channel 13, which is now known as WNET, but it's basically had been set up in the early 60s as a publicly funded channel with a lot of support from the Ford Foundation. And she starts to make, little short documentaries focused on poverty and early childhood education, especially in parts of the city like Harlem. And she kind of starts to really feel like a mission in her work towards addressing poverty and education, especially in kids. Lloyd Morissette is a Yale-educated psychologist. He is kind of part of, I would say, the like social science boom in the years after World War II. He's hired at the Carnegie Corporation in 1959, and he's charged with kind of focusing on innovative developments in psychology, especially with an aim towards how they could apply towards children's education. There's another name who ends up being the first showrunner of Sesame Street, a man named John Stone, and he's like a TV guy. He's the one who ends up bringing Jim Henson into the project as well. But I lay out those names because I think it's really important that you have a sort of mission-driven television person, a social psychologist who focuses on the sort of theory of kids' education, and then a kind of like showrunner, producer type. And that's like the mix that it takes to bring together Sesame Street. And then the other kind of context is just sort of the nature of TV in this moment, in this sort of early to mid 60s. So Americans by the mid 60s are watching 6 hours of TV a day. Kids are watching 27 hours of TV a week.
Screen time, baby.
I know, right?
Screen time, exactly. Like, you know, TV, I think when it first came out in the 40s and 50s, actually sort of had this promise of being a place for real kind of education and achievement and artistic expression, especially compared to, I think people saw the movies as kind of schlocky at that point. And, you know, a lot of like early TV was born out of like the theater circles and innovative theater circles in New York, and people were kind of like pushing the medium. But by the time you get into the 50s and 60s, it's been commercialized, it's been whittled down, it's like, you know, it's been dumbed down in many ways, to the point where you get this very famous moment where the FCC chairman under JFK in 1961, this man named Newton Minow, gives this really remarkable speech that I've heard a number of times and I've worked into a number of projects I've worked on, but he calls TV a, quote, vast wasteland. And he says, and he kind of issues a charge. He's like, is there no room on television to teach, to inform, to uplift, to stretch, to enlarge the capacities of our children? And he kind of sounds the alarm that kids and all of us are watching so much of this medium, and it is, as he says, quote, a vast wasteland. So that's the context, and then I want to kind of get into how Sesame Street starts to come together. One other little tidbit, though, worth noting is so that man's name is Newton Minow, and he's the one who gives the vast wasteland TV and kind of calls out existing TV execs. The showrunners of Gilligan's Island end up naming the boat on which all the people were shipwrecked the SS Minnow, as a little bit of a dig, as a little bit of a payback. But I love that little tidbit in TV history. So petty. So petty.
I love pettiness.
So we have these people with these big ideas, and we have this larger context of television getting dumbed down and not being seen as a place for uplift and education. And so they start to scheme, right, Kellie?
Yeah. I mean, I think part of this too, it's, I think, important to mention LBJ and like his whole push for the Great Society and this idea that he is also trying to address key issues like poverty and early childhood education, Head Start gets started at this moment as well. And so it's like, how do we intervene in children's lives as early as possible? And if they're already watching TV, then how do we meet them sort of where they're at? And so this group of people that you had mentioned before, Joan Cooney, the dinner party. It always starts at the dinner party hours.
Wait a minute. Yes.
Always starts in an apartment.
This. All good things start with a dinner party.
That's so true. A dinner party in her apartment. All things start in apartments too, in Gramercy Park. And I'm sure with some wine. And they start talking about their kids and the programming that they're watching and the TV that they watch, and how their kids have sort of, like we probably all did as kids, memorized like commercial jingles and like these, shows that would come on, and you had them like down packed. And they started talking about, well, what if, we had something that was a little more educational? What if we did something that could provide kind of the things that Minnow is talking about, but just for kids to really speak to them? And so they start to really strategize at this dinner party what that show could look like and what that show would entail. And that's where Sesame Street is developed.
And this is really a burgeoning moment of children's television. Like, how can we provide something other than schlock? How can we provide something that's like captivating and interesting? So you get Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood that premieres in this period. We've talked about Schoolhouse Rock. Just some way of not just providing for children, but also like in terms of the media, using the public airways came with this public interest charge. And so how could you actually serve the public interest through this new technology? It really was this like, we've seen this time and time again, but like the promise of the new technology, we can educate the masses.
Yeah.
Hello, this is Matt from the Explorers Podcast. I want to invite you to join me on the voyages and journeys of the most famous explorers in the history of the world. These are the thrilling and captivating stories of Magellan, Shackleton, Lewis and Clark, and so many other famous and not so famous adventurers from throughout history. Go to explorerspodcast.com or just look us up on your podcast app. That's the Explorers Podcast.
The countdown is on. Holiday shopping season is officially here, and Uncommon Goods takes the stress out of gifting with thousands of unique, high-quality finds you won't see anywhere else. Look, if you go to the Uncommon Goods website, it'll be obvious right away that they look for products that are high-quality, unique, and often handmade or made in the U.S. Many are crafted by independent artists and small businesses, making every gift feel meaningful and truly one of a kind. And it's not just gifts or items for the home. There is a section on their website labeled Experiences. I recently checked it out, and you can find all sorts of really unique classes, events, and more. I went ahead and bought myself a Trade Secrets coffee tasting class. The box just arrived in the mail, and in it are 5 different kinds of coffee and a guide to preparing them, evaluating them, making tasting notes, basically an at-home blind taste test. There's even a Zoom session I could join with an expert to walk me through it. I'm really excited about this. I'll report back once I find my perfect cup. So, whether it's an experience like a coffee tasting or map making or a toy or an item for the home or kitchen, don't Don't wait. Cross those names off your list before the rush. To get 15% off your next gift, go to uncommongoods.com/thisday. That's uncommongoods.com/thisday for 15% off. Uncommon Goods. We're all out of the ordinary. You know about HelloFresh, right? HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit in America, making home cooking easier with chef-crafted recipes and fresh ingredients delivered straight to your door. You know about HelloFresh. But something you may not know is that this fall, they have completely taken things to a new level. HelloFresh has doubled its menu. That's right, doubled its menu. You can now choose from 100 options each week, including new seasonal dishes and recipes from all around the world. And healthier ones too. Recipes featuring seafood and high protein. I recently cooked scallops with asparagus and potatoes. I'd never really cooked scallops at home, but they tasted great, were fun to make, and boom, just like that, I'm now someone who can prepare scallops at home. As we head into colder weather and home cooking season, it is time to check out the best way to cook, which just got better. Go to HelloFresh.com/thisday10fm now to get 10 free meals plus a free item for life. 1 box per active subscription, free meals applied as a discount on the first box. New subscribers only, varies by plan. Once again, that's HelloFresh.com/thisday10fm to get 10 free meals and a free item for life. Yeah, I mean, it reminds me of a moment now, kind of in the wake of social media where everyone was like, well, the technology itself is going to just lead to a flourishing and lead to sort of connection and so forth. And it's like, no, it tends to.
And now we're overrun by Nazis.
It's a race to the bottom. And then you need people to just sit down and say, okay, we need some real ideas here. And we need some real kind of deeper thinking. So they kind of come up with an initial plan to pilot a show and develop a show, and they go to the places where they think they have circles, which is a lot of foundations, and they still meet all this resistance from these foundations. Be like, really? TV? You want to do all these special things in TV? But they managed to get $15,000 from the Carnegie Foundation, from the Carnegie Corporation, and the goal is, as one of them put it, to master the addictive qualities of television and do something good with them.
So you could write a jingle to teach kids the alphabet so take advantage of the things that we all hate about television, or that progressives hate about television, and see if you can use it to actually teach. And they run a little study, and the study suggests that actually this might work. So they start with that itty bitty grant, and then they get $1 million grant. And then they put together something called the Children's Television Workshop. And they compile a ton of research by 1968. They use that research, and they get a combined grant of $8 million from the Carnegie Corporation, the Ford Foundation, and the U.S. federal government. So it's public-private partnership that goes into the development of this new children's television show. And the idea behind it was, we want to do something universalist. We want it to be appealing to kids from every socioeconomic background, every ethnic background. But they were particularly focused on poor children with fewer economic advantages, in part because studies showed that those children entered first grade with reading skills that were 6 months behind their counterparts in the middle class, and that those deficiencies would only grow over the course of their education. And so they very deliberately set Sesame Street in a working class neighborhood at a brownstone in the inner city, which is actually really remarkable in 1968. At this very moment that the inner city is associated with crime and destruction and rioting, and when there's white flight that has abandoned the inner cities, and there's been this deep disinvestment, all of a sudden this children's show is going to be set right in the heart of that inner city. And the idea was it's going to be in a rundown neighborhood. There are going to be those metal garbage cans in the street that have a little Muppet living inside of them. And he goes to Joan and says, this is what I want to do. I want to set it in a bunch of trash cans in an alley in an urban neighborhood. And she had been imagining a magical tree house in the backyard of a suburban home.
Yes.
He's like, no, it's going to be gritty. And the color is going to be muted. And she's just like, okay, have at it. See what you can do. And so he makes this set that's basically a mashup of Harlem and the Bronx and Spanish Harlem, just blending them all together. And it does have like a real sort of cinema verite quality to it, right? Like, it's like, we're going to show this scuffed up and there's going to be dirt and grime and everything. And it's going to look really lived in. There's going to be traffic noise. And Bert and Ernie are going to share a basement apartment that doesn't get a lot of sunlight.
Yeah.
Which is kind of what it's like to live in New York.
Yeah. It's spot on. I mean, I think there is that element of the like authenticity, but at the same time, it's a place where there's joy and there's love and there's learning, and you can see how neighbors are interacting with one another. And it's not a place that the people who live there are trying to escape. It's a place in which they dwell and in which they sort of experience, you know, what it means to like learn and engage your neighbor. And so that is what I think is so important, is that it gives dignity to the people who live there and really allows them to be seen as human beings.
You know, it's funny when you read the reports at the time and you read about some of the thinking that went into it. Jane Jacobs doesn't get name checked that much, but I mean, she's clearly the like patron saint over this whole idea, right? That the streetscape is a place where you make actual connections, and that even if and that like the grime and the noise and the discordancy is actually kind of part of the texture of what brings communities together.
She was talking about eyes on the street. I don't think she was imagining like Cookie Monster's little rolly eyes, but it's still there.
Yeah. And we'll get to the sort of introduction of those characters in a second too, which I think was the other big insight. But on the location, I mean, I think it's a really sort of popular parlor game in New York City to kind of speculate on where exactly is Sesame Street set. And I mean, they've never said it. And I think you mentioned some of the neighborhoods, Niki, that it was sort of based on. But people love to claim like, oh, no, it's clearly Bed-Stuy, or no, it's clearly Harlem or whatever. But, you know, between all those iconic places, I mean, there's obviously 123 Sesame Street is the brownstone row house at the center of it. And then, Oscar's Trash Can and Big Bird's Nest and the Arbor, which is a sort of carriage house, and Hooper's Store, obviously a big part of it. But it really does sort of depict that ideal streetscape. And I just want to reinforce how radical that was. I mean, I think a lot of the people, when they first thought like, oh, a kid's show should be set in a kind of like magical, otherworldly place, and it's like, no, the kids are gonna like walk down the street and there's gonna be garbage blowing across it. Like, it's kind of amazing.
And I mean, the other radical part of it is that the cast was majority Black and brown at a time when that was pretty unusual and would end up being kind of controversial in some parts of the country. I also think it's worth mentioning, you know, we talked about all this research that went into what children need and how you might be able to use television. They also did a ton of testing to figure out how do we keep kids' attention. And they found that like they didn't need things like transitions between scenes, that kids didn't need to be told why they're now in a new place. They liked like these really short, punchy scenes, which is probably no big surprise. They also found that the kids' attention would really begin to wane when there were no Muppets on the screen. And so, in fact, they ended up redesigning. Me too. I didn't come here to see people. I came here to see Muppets.
How much political science research do you need to gain the insight that kids like Muppets?
Yes.
Well, look, they had a lot of it. They sort of devised this test to find out like how can we keep kids' attention like 80 to 90% of the time. And if an episode wasn't doing it, they would just go back and reshoot it. And they even redesigned the Muppets so that the Muppets can have conversations with people, because they were like, if we're gonna include real people, they have to be sharing the screen with the Muppets, because otherwise kids do not care. So they made all of those changes in order to just draw children in.
I mean, that is, I think, one of the huge, so as we're starting to kind of list the insights and the secrets that made it work, but definitely that one of like that people need to interact with the Muppets was a huge moment, and that wasn't originally going to be the case. Jim Henson had to kind of like rework things, and specifically Oscar and Big Bird now all of a sudden were kind of built into the texture of the show. I mean, the other thing, I hinted at this in the intro, but like the simple fact that adults talk to kids like they were real people is so huge. And I think that continues to be the case. I think that continues to be, even as now I've engaged with a lot of kids media as my daughter watches stuff and listens to stuff. It still feels like the big divide for me between like shows that feel good and special and shows that feel schlocky. It's like, do they treat kids like real people?
Yeah. It's not like beat it, kid.
Yeah. Or just like talking down to them or like expecting that they can't engage with big ideas, or complex ideas, and that I think is the big insight of Sesame Street. I mean, think about how many times a sort of adult sits down and talks to a kid and tries to explain something and get there and asks them questions. Doesn't just talk at them. I mean, that is the huge insight.
I mean, Sesame Street was known for doing that. Sesame Street and Mr. Rogers, I have to say, is like tackling things that you normally wouldn't consider having a conversation with a child about, like things like racism or things like death or things like, war. I mean, like these were really big concepts, and Sesame Street was doing it in a way that was so smart and thoughtful. And I mean, the fact that they have this child psychologist on the show, they're really trying to like not traumatize children, but actually get people to have meaningful conversations.
One other thing we should point out, they weren't really sure what the name should be up until pretty late. It's kind of amazing.
Wasn't it something like 123 Avenue A?
Yeah, 123 Avenue B.
It rhymed at least. 123 Avenue B. Yeah. Which actually, I lived right around the corner from 123 Avenue B. That address is at B and 8th Street and right across from Tompkins Square Park. And that would have placed it like in a very specific physical space. And then, a lot of stuff happened in Tompkins Square Park throughout the 80s and 90s that I think would have been very interesting for them to contend with. But no, they then instead chose Sesame Street.
I love a good
alliteration. They wanted
alliteration.
it to be real, but not too real.
Yeah. And I love a good alliteration. Yeah, and I kind of like that no one can sort of claim Sesame Street as like their block.
Well, it's universal. Embedded in the theme song, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not actually a specific place. So can you tell them how to get to Sesame Street?
Yes.
No, you cannot.
But did you growing up watching it at least think, oh, this is New York City? Or were you really just like, this is just a totally...
I probably would have thought it was Chicago because I was living in the suburbs of Chicago. And so like New York was not something on my zeitgeist quite yet. But as I got older and when I lived and moved to Brooklyn and I started watching episodes of Sesame Street with my son, I felt very deeply connected to like, this is Bed-Stuy, this is Brooklyn.
Totally.
And I grew up in rural Indiana. I don't think I knew what New York City was or maybe even what a city was. So that was like, I didn't have like an external referent to like connect it to.
I live in a neighborhood in New York called Sunset Park, and there's an actual park here. And I contend that, on a warm, late summer evening in Sunset Park, it is like the greatest place on planet Earth. And, it's just like it's just so magical. But my wife has a line about trying to describe how great it is out in Sunset Park on one of those nights. And she's like, for people whose only idea of what New York City is comes from Sesame Street, that's what like our neighborhood feels like in those moments, just like everyone out on the street, music playing, people running around, kids on bikes, like young, old, like everyone interacting, it really, that magic, when it's magical, does really, I think, capture something about certainly what I love about cities.
Yeah.
And not just this city, but all cities have that.
Yes. But Brooklyn has it in spades.
Brooklyn definitely. Yeah. I mean, I will always ride for Brooklyn.
Same.
But let's come back to the narrative here. And we are now in kind of the late summer of 1969. They have made 5 episodes. They've tested them in 60 homes throughout Philly and in New York City daycare centers. I mean, they are so concerted about this. And I think, the story of the Children's Television Workshop is as much sort of like research institution as production company. I mean, that continues over the years, and they get ready to launch heading into November of 1969. One little tidbit, and then we will end part 1. But, I mentioned that Joan Cooney started as a publicist. One really smart move, and take note, all of you who out there who make stuff, they squirreled away a little over $1 million, not nothing, for just pure publicity at the time. And it gave it a real boost. And I think that was her doing to say, like, we really need to inject this into the ethos. which it does, and it takes off pretty quick. And we will talk about the reaction to it as it premieres, and then, of course, our thoughts and memories about the show and what it has meant to us over the years. But we will leave it there for the end of part 1 of our episode on the birth of Sesame Street. Nicole Hemmer, thanks to you as always.
Thank you, Jody.
And Kellie Carter-Jackson, thanks to you.
My pleasure.
This is the end of Sally's big day. First day on Sesame Street.
Did you have fun, Sally? Sure. You like Sesame Street, huh?
Well, look who she met. She met Bert.
Yeah, met me.
And she met Ernie.
Oh, yeah.
And you learned all about the letter E.
The letter E.
Oh, the letter E.
I
Well, look, while he's going off about the letter E, I think we've got to go off, too. This is Sesame Street. We have a great time here. You come back and join us anytime you want to. We're going to be here, right? Sally's going to be here. Everybody's going to be here. Come back and join us. See you later.
This Day is a proud member of Radiotopia, a network of independent, artist-produced podcasts. Don't forget to sign up for our America250 Watch newsletter. Every Thursday, members get exclusive access to analysis and information about the upcoming semi-quincentennial, commentary from our team, and a list of fascinating things that happened that week throughout history. Join in, find out lots more at thisdaypod.com. You can also follow This Day Pod on Instagram, Blue Sky, and YouTube. Jacob Feldman is our researcher. Brittany Brown is our editor. My name is Jody Avirgan. See you soon.
Radiotopia. From P